A man stood in a market and wept over a piece of cloth, not because he was poor, not because he had lost something. He wept because a stranger had seen something in his own work that he, after years at the loom, had completely missed. His name was Atta. He was a weaver. He had worked in Nishapur for many years, producing cloth that other men in the market respected. His hands knew the loom the way a farmer knows his field. He did not rush. He did not cut corners. He believed he was careful. That morning, he had carried a finished length of cloth to the market. He had folded it himself. He had checked it himself. He was ready to sell it and return home before the afternoon heat settled over the city streets. The merchant who ran the stall was a man Atta had dealt with before. He was not unfriendly. He unfolded the cloth slowly, pulling it out across the wooden surface of the stall, smoothing it with both palms, looking at it the way a man looks at something he is about to spend money on. The merchant said nothing at first. He ran his fingers along one edge of the cloth, then doubled back. He stopped at a point near the center. He did not look up. He pressed his thumb against the weave and held it there for a moment, as if making sure of what he was feeling. Then he looked up. He pointed to the spot. He told Atta, plainly and without anger, that there was a flaw in the weave, a section where the threads had not crossed correctly. It was small, he said, but it was there, and any buyer who knew cloth would find it. Atta looked at the spot. He bent forward and looked closely. He touched it himself. He turned the cloth over and looked at the back side. He straightened up. He told the merchant he was wrong. He said there was no flaw. He said he had checked this cloth himself before bringing it. The merchant did not argue. He simply pointed again. He told Atta to look once more, this time from a different angle, with the light coming from the side. He stepped back to give Atta room. He waited. He was not trying to cheat. He was not trying to win. He was simply showing what he saw. Atta shifted his position. He tilted his head. He looked at the cloth from the angle the merchant had described, and there it was, a small section, no larger than 2 fingers wide, where the threads had gone wrong. It was not invisible. It was not hidden. It was simply something he had not seen. He stood up straight. He said nothing. The market moved around him. Sellers called out to passing customers. A donkey pulled a cart somewhere behind him. Children ran between the stalls. None of it reached him. He was standing very still inside a very loud place. Then he began to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically. His shoulders did not shake. He simply stood there, and tears came down his face. The merchant saw it and became uncomfortable. He had not expected this. He had only meant to point out a flaw before agreeing on a price. The merchant told Atta not to worry. He said the flaw was small. He said that a cloth with one small error was still a good cloth. He said he would pay the full price anyway because the rest of the work was honest and the material was good. He was trying to be kind. Atta shook his head. He stepped back from the coins. He told the merchant to keep them. He was not crying about the money. He was not crying about the flaw in the cloth either. Not really. He was crying about something else, and it was going to take him a moment to say it. He told the merchant that he had sat at that loom for many days, making that cloth. He had been there for every thread. He had looked at it every morning when he sat down and every evening when he stood up. He had folded it with his own hands. He had carried it here himself. And in all of that time, he said, across all of those hours and all of those glances, he had not seen what a stranger had seen in less than 2 minutes. Not because the floor was hidden, but because he had made it. His hands had made it, and his eyes had stopped being able to find it. He said that this was the thing that frightened him. Not that he had made a mistake. Every weaver makes mistakes. What frightened him was that he had looked directly at his own mistake many times, and his eyes had told him everything was fine. His own eyes had lied to him. The merchant said nothing. He folded his arms. He looked at the cloth. He was beginning to understand that this conversation was not about the cloth anymore, and perhaps had not been about the cloth for some time. He waited for Atta to continue. Atta said that a man who cannot see his own errors is not simply careless. He is blind in a particular way. He is blind in the exact shape of his own habits. The places he always looks, he stops truly seeing. The places he always touches, he stops truly feeling. He said that the flaw in the cloth was not the problem. The problem was the certainty. The problem was that he had stood here this morning and told a man who had seen the flaw clearly that the man was wrong. He had defended the mistake. He had protected it without knowing. The merchant picked up the cloth and folded it carefully. He did this slowly, as if he understood that the moment required slowness. He set it back on the stall surface. He did not push the coins forward again. He did not speak. He simply stood, with Atta in the noise of the market. After a long silence, Atta picked up the cloth. He told the merchant he was going to take it back to the workshop. He was going to undo the flawed section and reweave it. Not because the merchant had refused to buy it. The merchant had offered full price. He was going back because he needed to understand how he had missed it. He walked back through the market. The same donkey, the same sellers, the same dust in the air. But he walked differently now, not slower, not faster. He walked like a man who had just been handed a question he did not know how to answer yet and was going home to sit with it. He sat down at his loom. He found the floor with his fingers, now that he knew where to look. He pulled the threads back carefully, undoing several hours of work. And as he did it, he noticed something. From this direction, undoing it, the mistake was obvious. It had always been obvious. He simply had not been looking from this direction before. There is a thing that happens when you make something with your own hands over a long period of time. Your eyes begin to see what they expect to see. They fill in the gaps. They smooth over the rough places. They have seen this thing so many times that they have stopped looking at it and started remembering it instead. This is why a friend who tells you the truth is worth more than 10 friends who tell you the cloth is fine. This is why, when someone else reads your work a year after you wrote it, they find things you never found. This is why the best builders of careful systems insist that another person must check the work, not because the first person is foolish, but because the first person is too close. You cannot audit yourself with the same eyes that made the mistake. The eyes that wove the flaw into the cloth are the eyes that will skip over it every time. Not because they are bad eyes, because they are your eyes shaped by your habits, your certainties, the exact angles from which you always look. Atta did not weep because he had made a flaw. He wept because he had defended it. He had looked a man in the eye and said the flaw was not there. That is the sharper wound. Not the error itself, but the confidence that the error does not exist. That confidence is the thing that must be broken before anything can be fixed. The merchant was not an enemy. The stranger who marks your work, the colleague who reads your plan and finds the gap, the old draft you open a year later and barely recognize, these are not attacks. They are the angle you could not reach from where you were standing. They are the raking light. Atta rewove the section. He brought the cloth back to the market the next day. The merchant bought it. The price was the same. The cloth was the same weight and the same color. But Atta knew what was in it now, and he knew what was not. That knowing cost him a day. It gave him something harder to name. The loom does not forgive the weaver for being close to it. Closeness is not the same as clarity. The man who has spent the most time with a thing is often the last one to see.